So for those of you who spend your time running an e-commerce store but aren't developers, there may be some stuff in here that gets a little bit far down into the world of what your developers are actually working in. This morning's presentation was a little bit more high-level, business-focused. This is actually getting down into some of the architectural changes that we made to make Magento 2 a better product. So once again, hopefully you've heard about Magento 2 by now. We've been talking about it. I've been talking about it for a good while now. And I'll mention again in case anyone missed it. I'm still surprised. I go around the world and I get the question, when is Magento 2 coming out? And I don't know if that's because people don't believe us when we said that it's coming out in the fourth quarter, but Community Edition and Enterprise Edition are, in fact, launching in November. Now, earlier today, I went through the developer benefits. I'm sorry, the general platform benefits. Today, right now I'm going through the developer benefits. Really, the story of Magento 2 starts very much with Magento 1 because we had a lot to learn, right? I mean, you grab some Java developers and you throw them into a dark caged room and you get them to write a PHP framework. And out comes this Magento idiom of MVC. And then they build this e-commerce app on top of it. So that's two things, right? That's two things that we did, and it's basically what we did with Magento 2 as well. Make a framework, and then use that framework and its concepts to build an e-commerce application. So the case could be made. In fact, my buddy Marius in Romania just a couple days ago made a presentation where he stripped out all of the e-commerce stuff from Magento 2. And this has already been done with Magento 1. There's a guy by the name of Colin Mollenauer, and he's the one who actually created the Redis session storage module that we actually ship with the Magento 1 core. But he's got a project on GitHub called, I think it's called Magento Lite or Mage Lite, and it is Magento as a framework, just with all of the e-commerce stuff pulled out. Now, developers rely on frameworks because they help us do part of our job for us. The stuff that you have to do again and again. Represent entities, store those entities, handle communication from and to the requester, namely the person at the other end of the browser. And in Magento 2, we looked at a lot of the developer experience, and we'll continue to look at the developer experience as well. Even after the release, we wanted to kind of tackle some high-level things. So here they are. Essentially, give you a lot more to work with. The ability to leverage external code, the ability to have version interfaces into your modules, the ability to have version interfaces into our modules. We also wanted to solve the problem of release management, right? How many of us developers have been here, had that moment where you push the deployment button and then somewhere something caught on fire? I've done that before. It's not a good feeling. And really that comes down to testability. You heard me harp on testability earlier today. I'll harp on it again in a bit. We also wanted to make sure that from the beginning we had good guidance and documentation. So there are some goals here for improving the developer experience. We wanted to modernize the tech stack. We wanted to make sure that you would know that you're writing code that works. We wanted to handle any issues of performance and scalability, make Magento easy and obvious to upgrade. Reduce the time and effort it takes to introduce customizations, and also to simplify these external integrations with all these third-party services, your order management systems, your ERP systems, tax integrations, whatever they may be. And now we go into the details. Modern tech stack. We're using Composer. Composer is PHP's dependency management thing. If you're used to Node, it's like NPM. There's so many great packages out there to work with. Composer helps make sure that you always have a recipe for pulling in all these disparate resources, combining them, and making sure that you're not either doubling up on some work or that you're not pulling in improper versions. Essentially, you create your Composer manifest and let it do the rest. What this means, and I just did this actually a few minutes ago, sitting at Eric's Mage Mojo booth over there. I just entered one line in my terminal here on my Mac, and I had a Magento installation just using Composer. And it pulls in all of the necessary dependencies for me. In order to do this, now, and I should mention that we actually internally have our own, each module has a version. Right now, they all share the same version. It's like the one little thing that I hope we can get resolved soon. But we're obeying the tenets of semantic versioning. So semver, as it's called, actually has meaning. All the numbers have meaning. So when you see like 1.14.something, that first number, that's the major version. Anytime we make a breaking change in the underlying platform, we're going to increment that number. Then you have the minor version, patch and maintenance. So you'll see most of the changes probably taking place in those non-major versions. But I should mention that as Alan Kent, our absolutely outstanding chief architect, has on his blog, just published something about our versioning in Magento 2. He and I, a long time ago, were talking, and we decided that, among several different options that he'd presented, the best one was to have two versions for Magento 2. By which I mean, there's going to be the marketing version. I don't know, if you've ever been to any of our conferences, we really like to have a release at a conference. So 2, 2.1, 2.2, these are all marketing versions. Underneath, we have a platform version. To avoid confusion, that platform version starts at 100. Okay, just an arbitrary number, but that way we don't have this kind of confusing period where we have like the platform version at 1, and then we have some breaking change to like one method, and we have to make it version 2. See, we have two different needs. We have a need to tell merchants, hey, here, this release is composed of these features. That's what the marketing version is for. In our platform, we can do these things. We can make even big breaking changes if we need to. And we don't have to then tell marketing, hey, this is now Magento 3, because it's hard enough, I think, to get people to go from 1 to 2. We can't throw 3 at them in a couple months. So as developers, we'll always look at that platform version. And we won't ask merchants to worry about that at all. We'll handle that ourselves, right? We also are using some of the more recent frameworks out there, Symfony 2, ZF2. Also require.js to manage JavaScript dependencies. So it's not just the back end. It's not just the PHP stuff that we've changed. We've actually made some changes in the front end as well, quite a few. Introducing CSS preprocessing. So if there are any front end developers in here, you're going to have a new workflow to work with, right? Involving fun things like grunt. I don't even know how front end development works anymore. It's crazy. You guys are compiling now. I thought you became a front-end developer so you wouldn't have to worry about compiling or anything like that. Also, we've gotten rid of all of the crazy prototype objects that were in there. We're using jQuery now. We also are tackling the very important need that Magento 1 just didn't address. Magento 1 is really hard to test. There are some very sharp developers who've actually helped make sort of testing frameworks that reduce some of the complexity of testing in Magento 1, but based on its architecture, it has some hard-coded stuff that really just makes it not very convenient. So we completely decoupled the code. We tried to standardize if something was built this way in this module, an analogous thing built in another module would be built the same way. Anyone who's ever tried to figure out admin HTML in Magento knows what I'm talking about. Because when the first time you tried to build an admin view, you would go and look at this module, because it basically looked like what you wanted to build. And you would see how it was implemented. And then you would look at another module that looks like that module, and the code wouldn't match up. I gave up. Like the first 3 times I tried to build anything in admin, I ended up just banging it into the system configuration because it wasn't the code itself wasn't a good reference. It was inconsistent. And we're trying to make sure that doesn't happen in 2. You guys can actually help out with that, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. But we do really want your involvement. So full test coverage. I actually may need to update that. I'm not sure how complete the test coverage will be at the beginning, but we have quite a bit. And there are 3 kinds of tests in Magento 2. You have unit tests for testing discrete functionality at a low level. You have the functional tests for putting groups together and executing. And then you have integration tests. So as you're developing, you'll be working most with unit tests. When it comes time to test the functioning of your code in a small context, that's your functional tests. And when you're done with your development, when maybe as part of your release management, you'll execute the integration tests. And these will actually test via the interface. We also have this really cool declarative dependency injection. So this is an XML, yet another XML file in Magento. But essentially, there are no hard-coded dependencies anymore. You will never see a class being instantiated directly inside of any other class. Everything is passed in via constructor. And then all of that stuff is actually handled via an object proxy that can lazy load objects or proactively load them if needed. As you heard me mention earlier today, we have decided that for Magento 2, anything performance related is core. So any indexing improvements, any full page cache concern, anything dealing with the site just running faster in general, that's going to be part of the core. So we put full page cache, taken it away from an enterprise feature and just made it part of the core. I think that speaks a lot to our attitude about performance in Magento 2. We've also made sure that the system can be prepared in such a way that it has to do very little work to calculate its state. Magento 1 has to spend a lot of time upon initialization to determine various parts of its configuration. And that doesn't happen so much in Magento 2. And there are benchmarks out there, not ours, others, that demonstrate that this is very effective. For developers, if you're developing, just know that Magento now has 3 modes. Developer mode, which is very slow. Default, which hopefully you're never using. It just means you forgot to set it up. And then production. I just remembered I forgot to set it up. My instance is running in default. And then production mode. Production essentially means, hey, I've materialized all of this stuff that I need to materialize. I've got things cached where they need to be cached, and Magento runs very quickly. And then for something like scalability, so the ability to separate off, to have a separate database for your sales, for sales-related transactions database. This is a scalability concern. Anything dealing with issues of scale, we're reserving that for our enterprise offering. As I mentioned earlier today, I think that's a reasonable a reasonable perspective to have, because we have to make enterprise appealing as an offering on its own. And for those of you who never actually work with enterprise, or maybe kind of loathe the idea that there would be an enterprise version of an open source product, enterprise has funded a lot of what is available for community. So it's a very good thing that it's there for us. And we'll work very hard to make it a clear distinction between when enterprise is the right choice versus community edition. If you have taken the time to set up Magento 2, how many of you have already set up Magento 2? A few of you, okay. You'll notice that there's a separate entry point for setup. And actually, when you install extensions, this actually happens through that separate entry point. We have a much improved wizard for installing Magento, and there's also some other options with CLI and so forth. And then I have to start reusing some of the things I've been talking about, because a lot of the developer benefits, things that we did to benefit the developers, actually are give us benefits in other places as well. So with decoupled code, when you don't have these sort of not so obvious dependencies between things, it means that your system is more isolated, it's less brittle. In Magento 1, you would do something interesting like say, I'm not using the newsletter module, let me disable that. And then people couldn't check out. Not quite an obvious connection. But there are just some dependencies behind the scenes that made this a reality. And so with testing, with more isolated units of code, this then becomes much easier to do, going from version to version. And that's a pretty important thing, because now when you install Magento, you can reliably tell your merchants, hey, not only are you're getting this 2.0 today, but when 2.1 comes out, it will be very straightforward to upgrade you to 2.1, and you're going to get a whole bunch of features for just the cost of a couple of hours of running the upgrade. Magento, well, commerce in general, right? You don't do commerce in a one-size-fits-all way. So the ability to change the behavior of the system or add new functionality to the system is, well, it's essential, right? If an e-commerce platform doesn't do this, it doesn't succeed, right? Or it's a SaaS offering which has a fine set of features. We have very interesting offering in Magento 2. I'm going to actually jump down to the interceptors. Essentially, while we still have the event observer system, every public method in Magento 2 is essentially a consumable event. What this means is that you can, just through simple configuration, execute functionality before, after, or around some other core method in the system. This gives you a lot of power and flexibility. I'm sure it's also going to be used for all sorts of evil stuff. But we're actually developing tools that will help analyze these so-called plugins to let you know what's going on, what they're doing. We also have the service layer. Now, the service layer ties into a customization mechanism. It also ties into integrations. What we do with the service layer, it's essentially a way of packaging up data containers for consumption inside and outside the system, also for accessing the functionality inside and outside of the system. So think of it as a specific a web API. And I think that's all I have to say. In general, we also have a cleaned up API, runs much faster. And we have clearer code paths, meaning that not only have we cleaned up sort of how standardized how things are used from one module to the other. We also have reduced the overall complexity of application execution. Another really good note: if anyone has ever had to customize the checkout, there was a really interesting thing that happened at Imagine this year. We had a couple of our core architects there from Kiev, and they sat down at the hackathon in Las Vegas that happens before the Imagine event. And their hack was simply just discussing with some of our brightest minds in the community, people like Fabrizio Branca, checkout architecture, issues with customization. And the outcome of that was a reworked checkout modeling that means you can much more easily add and remove steps, modify it to your needs, and not have to deal with the absolute hell that is the JavaScript thing in Magento 1. And the coupling between those two. If you've never had to do a Magento 1 checkout customization, I think that makes you lucky. What this also means, and I should also point out that we have also changed how checkout works by default. It's a two-step process. We did a lot of usability testing, and we think that there's going to be much less of a need to even implement a custom checkout. And this is a good thing because a lot of the custom checkout offerings out there that are external, third-party extensions, end up, because they have to be so invasive, end up causing other problems with other extensions, and sometimes even conflicting with core functionality. So I wanted to take just a second and stress again, pull one thing out, because this is as developer evangelist, or chief evangelist, or whatever marketing calls me this week. This is the thing that actually, it excites me and it scares the hell out of me. Because we have a tested core. And we have a huge community, not just Magento, PHP developers in general. Testing is very new. I didn't make this point earlier when I was talking about Magento 1. The reason Magento 1 was written in a way that was hard to test was because we didn't have testing in PHP back in 2007. But we have it now. There's a lot of great resources out there. People like Chris Harchis, also known as the Grumpy Programmer. He and many others are strong advocates for testing. There are test-driven training sessions, even for Magento, being held right now. There's going to be one in Poland if anyone wants a road trip in a couple weeks. Testing is our future. Testing is exactly what merchants should be asking for. It's exactly what you should be doing as a developer. I'll quote Chris. He likes saying, testing means I can go home on time every night because he knows that his stuff works. So in Magento 2, untested code is incomplete code. Please quote me on that. I'll even pose if you want to take a picture. Wait, no, he's taking a picture over here. Here, give me in the shot. Give me in the shot. Great. It's essential that we get this. It's essential that you go home, start doing code katas with test-driven development. Start learning about testing. It's not that hard. And having learned, I can tell you, you won't go back. Testing, if you're doing it the right way, it'll make you a better developer. I have a psychology degree, and I can even do algorithmic stuff now because of testing. Also, things that are coming. New Magento Connect. As I mentioned earlier, we will have much better code quality. There will be fewer extensions. They will all be higher quality. There will be no tolerance for plagiarism. And we will also have lots of other features coming online. But the new Connect, in its first iteration, is going to launch along with Magento 2, officially available. And for those of you interested in building modules, it's not a bad idea. Get started. There's going to be kind of a little gold rush, I think, when Magento 2 and the new Connect come online. For those of you wondering about, hey, Magento 1. From the day we release Magento 2, Magento will continue to support Magento 1 and its related libraries for 3 years, okay? So we're not expecting you to jump immediately. But we think what will happen is if we're building Magento 2 the right way, after, 1 or 2 releases, it's going to be pretty compelling that you should jump over to Magento 2 to enjoy the benefits. We're also providing tooling for converting sites. So we actually have, the biggest thing, of course, is the database. So we'll help you port over your customers, your products, categories, and your sales entities, like orders. Actually, I also think the community is working on other porting tools. Themes will need to be rebuilt just because there have been massive changes into how themes are structured. The database migration tool also, it's nice because it actually will install triggers. So you'll have these stored procedures that will actually keep track of changes after it's been run once, so that then when you need to do the final conversion, it'll only pull over the new stuff. So getting started with M2, we have developer documentation. I go through this every couple of weeks to make sure it's good, it works. I just went through it sitting out there. Again, it's really easy to get going on 2. There's no excuse to not install it. I mean, maybe you're a little busy with your job, but come on, Magento 2 is fun. Also, as I mentioned earlier, we have courses. We have classes. You can take them online. I'm trying to see if they'll videotape me again, talking about Magento, making bad puns, wearing ugly green shirts. I've literally been called the ugly green shirt guy before. So that along with certification. So we have these resources. And again, I want to stress, the nice thing is we have them now, not 3 years in. Also, I will implore you to get involved with Magento 2. It's on GitHub. It's been on GitHub. You can actually contribute to it. We also just stood up a translation website. We created a project under crowdin.net, crowdin.net, where you can contribute to the translations for Magento 2. Because we figure you all are much better at translating things than Google Translate. We tried that once. It doesn't give satisfactory results. The documentation that's there as well, please, if you see anything wrong, there's that little link at the top. You can also contribute to that directly, and we would like for you to. I'd like to leave you with my mantra. One thing that being a part of the Magento community, first as an outsider, and now I'm on the inside of Magento, has proved to me time and again, and that is that we have an amazing community, and our community has always solved our problem.
Boa tarde, meu nome é Matheus. Eu tenho uma pergunta sobre o fórum. O fórum novo, eu percebi que mudou, na verdade, né? O fórum está diferente, só que quando você faz uma pesquisa para resolver algum problema do Magento antigo, geralmente alguém postou um link do fórum antigo, e isso é redirecionado para a página inicial do fórum e você perdeu todas as informações que você tinha no fórum antigo. Para onde é que foi essas informações? Será que a gente tem acesso a isso? Como é que vai ficar isso? Obrigado.
Obrigado. Bom. So, you're going on the road with me. The old forums had to get shut down. They were old software. They were actually a risk to the entire web property. So they had to take it offline for a second, and I said, put it down, it's dead. That was the right decision. They were full of spam. There's all these forum posts out there that were good answers to things, and we looked at setting up an archive. But if I remember correctly, we just didn't have the resources. Now I know people have a backup of that stuff, and we put it in read-only mode. Actually, I think they went full static for a while. It's a real pity that content's gone. The reason that we decided against the archive was because, and the reason it became a resource issue was because we knew we needed to go through and delete the spam content, and we just didn't have the resources to do it. It is unfortunate, though, that sort of, it's like Alderaan, a million inbound links, were screamed out and were suddenly silenced. Yeah, it's a pity. So if there's enough interest, because we have that content stored somewhere, perhaps, I could ask about standing up an archive, which would restore those links, and then we would be able to get the community to help go through and do some spam killing. It's an option. These are the kinds of things that all you have to do is email me. Thanks for the segue. Send me an email with requests. If I get enough people saying, "Hey, we want Magento to change its color to purple," maybe I can make it happen. Who knows? Anyway, I think I do need to stop now. I'm sorry, I talk too much. But thank you guys again. I will still be out here. I'm not going to go for churrascaria until later, after which I'll be completely useless and full of meat. So thank you guys once again very much. Enjoy.